Hello, I'm Peter Trono. Welcome to the studios of ATC Consulting. Today I'm going to start our series of air traffic control lessons with some simple word definitions that we seemingly have problems with. I can tell you that I've been to the heads of the organization, this was quite some time ago, and challenged them on these very issues that we're going to be speaking about today. And we have these words that are nebulous or have a meaning that could be taken different ways by different controllers. And when we do that, it causes problems with training because now we're not able to communicate properly the essence of the words that we're trying to say. And so to give you an example, when I went back there, I asked him, I said, I said that, I've heard in my career over and over again that we've got to get back to basics. We've got to get back to the basics. And while I don't disagree with that, my question was to them, what are the basics? And they kind of looked around and somebody raised their hand and they said positive separation. And I said positive separation. Okay, that certainly can be a basic, and we will get into a great description of what the basics are. But so I asked them, I said, what is your definition of positive separation? I went around the room and everyone had a different answer. Well, you see the problem with that? If everyone's answer, don't discontinue one type of separation without having another established, I'll always have a plan B, but everyone's answer was subtly different, right? And so, it just begged the question, if we're saying this to new people that are coming into their career field, what is positive separation? And we all have a different definition, we're not communicating the essence of what that word or those words are. So we're going to employ a strategy that I have long used, and it's called existential reasoning and reverse engineering, ER and RE. And we can get to the essence of what these words are, and also maybe have a little history that's mixed in with some of these words that we're going to be talking about. So let me give you an example of what ER and RE is, okay? So if I was to say existentially that training was a curve that looked like this, in other words, over time you got better, but then you did something like you became an OJTI, you're now instructing, and then you yourself, after you've done instructing, when you went back to controlling by yourself, said, gosh, I'm actually better. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to look this dramatic, but I'm using that as an example. So what I would want to do is existentially some great thing, some golden thing happened to us. Well, I, as somebody that wants to find out the reason why that is I need to reverse engineer what happened. What were the things that happened that caused you to get better? Because 99% of the controllers that I speak with say that after I've done OJT, after I've performed OJT, I myself is a better controller. So if that existentially is true, then I want to take those concepts out and train them back here. So that's a good example of what existential reasoning and reverse engineering looks like, okay? But when we're talking about words and word meanings, and there's going to be a long list that I can start with the basics, positive separation. Let's start with that, okay? So if somebody were to ask me what positive separation is, I would have to go back into history and talk about where those words came from, right? And so my research indicates that those words are not even applicable in a radar environment. Now, those tower folks that are listening in, just bear with me just for a moment. Let's just talk about the advent of radar in air traffic control. Prior to that, then these words existed. So if we were controlling airplanes, based upon strips, position reports. So we had 3 kinds of separation. We had vertical, lateral, and longitudinal. Those are the only rules that we had. And I have a .65 or Air Traffic Procedures book from 1961 to validate this. I'd be glad to share with you. Drop me an email. Okay, so positive separation is a term that was coined in the non-radar days. The example is that you had 3 strip postings, A, B, and C. Okay, fix A, B, and C, and then you would have Braniff, 123 and Clipper 456, and TWA 357. All right. So, and by the way, we did have 2-letter identifiers back then. So you would look at this, and of course, they would have other aircraft that were in these fixed postings too. But you would see an aircraft at the same altitude, okay, and then you would look at the time of those aircraft. So if this was 1723 and this was this guy's time over the fix was 1727, you would say I have 2 aircraft at the same altitude less than 10 minutes apart. Okay, so what do we call that? Well, I've given this instruction, and a lot of people have said, well, that's a deal. Well, no, it's not a deal because the time now is 1630. Okay, it's not a deal until 10 minutes prior to the second aircraft reaching the fix. You follow what I'm saying, right? So what we would say about this situation is that these airplanes are not positively separated, right? So I might relieve you, or you might relieve me, and I say, hey, I'll give you a weather briefing and all this stuff, and by the way, Braniff and Clipper here are not positively separated. But I'll be back in time to fix it if you want to do something that's not really appropriate to do something. It's too early, okay? So now, the only decision making would be, how am I going to fix it? Am I going to take him over a different fix? Am I going to change his altitude? The vertical, lateral, and longitudinal separation rules were the only rules that I had, right? So that's where positive separation came from. And the reason why that's important is because the airplanes were not positively separated. They were separated on a piece of paper or not separated on a piece of paper. Do you follow what I'm saying? But radar, when you bring in the advent of radar, now requires someone's judgment to figure out whether the airplanes are going to be separated or not. This would not be a good example. So this is why, if you're a controller at a center, for instance, say for instance you're going through training, and one controller who's training you will let you do certain things, and another controller will, no, I'm not comfortable with that. So we have this word comfort now that's associated with positive separation in a radar environment. So when we start involving feelings in a sort of black and white sense of the word, we run down a real slippery slope, and we lose control of the meaning of that word very, very quickly. Does that make sense to you? So positive separation is not even a term that's associated with radar. Now, I can give you my definition of positive separation, which I think fits a lot of examples, but it's not perfect, okay? In a radar environment, it's not perfect. So I will do that in a subsequent lesson. I can give you my definition, right? But what I would like us to be able to do is have words that come out of our mouth that communicate to new people what the meaning of positive separation is. Because we can't go around the room and dance around it, because would you say that this is a basic? Would you say that this is an important thing? Like, it's on all the training forms that we have, right? And so I would think that we would want to get this definition nailed down, don't you think? Or something that's at least universally acceptable, right? But what it is now is someone's comfort and a feeling. It's more of a feeling that we have whether the airplanes are separated or not, right? And if that's the case, then we have got to train something about performance management. because does your comfort matter to you? You bet it does. It does matter to you, right? And some people will say, I'm not comfortable doing this, where other controllers will say, well, I mean, I do that, you know, all day, every day, right? And I can get into some other examples about, let's just talk about that just for a moment. Positive separation. So let's just take, and let's say we've got one airplane at 1/6,000 and another airplane at 1/5,000. And they're 100 miles apart, okay? That guy's going this way, and this guy's going this way, right? And you descend this guy to 1/4,000, right? And they're 100 miles apart. Now, I asked this, the heads of the organization 10 years ago. And unbelievably, someone said, well, I got to know the speeds. Okay, all right, they're both doing 6 miles a minute, 360 knots, okay? Are they positive separation? So if you took 100 people, right, 99 of us would say, yeah, it's positive separation, but one person may say, well, that's not positive separation, that doesn't meet my criteria, I'm not comfortable with it, right? Well, guess what? If this guy happens to be your supervisor, then we've got an issue. You follow what I'm saying? So, and so we could take this number down to 90, and then all of a sudden, maybe it's 90 and 10. You know, 10 people say, and we can keep going. 80, 70, 60, you know, 60, 50. You know, I can tell you, you know, in my career, I would take two airplanes that were 40 miles apart doing this example, and I would do that all day, every day. And I would say that they're positively separated based upon my definition of positive separation, right? But if it doesn't meet yours, then guess what? The grade is not positive separation. So this sways, you know, and to a point where it's 50-50, and then all of a sudden now we've got, you know, 10 people say they're positively separated and 90. So it's an opinion poll, and we don't want that, especially with new people. It's confusing to them. They don't understand what you're getting at, and it changes, right? Maybe earlier in your career you wouldn't do something as risky as 40 miles apart because you don't have the necessary tools to fix it if something happens, if the guy doesn't get level, right? Or you can't say the words to get the guy level. Do you follow what I'm saying? So this word positive separation, first of all, historically is not even connected to radar. It's not even a radar term. Yet we usurp it to mean something, and we think that when we say positive separation, everybody knows what that means, and that's not true. So if it's that important, we have got to come up with some meanings for these things. Do you follow what I'm saying? Right? So when we talk about this, let's talk about now, if I'm developing training and I'm going to use existential reasoning and reverse engineering, I first must understand what makes a controller better. Does that make sense? So if I can't answer the question, what makes a controller better, and be able to get the essence of what it is. Now there's going to be secondary and tertiary and beyond that layers of things that are going to cause you to get better. Those are called KSAs, knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? We can make a list of all of them, especially if your option, if you're in a terminal, if you're in a tower, or you're en route, you're going to have different, you know, depending on where you are. If you're in mountainous terrain or if you're in flat land, you know, you're going to have different skill sets that you're going to need to use and perform on a daily basis, all right? So, but we need to know universally what makes a controller better. So this is a word that we have to have meaning to, right? Because I say, hey, I'm getting better. Well, how are you getting better? By plugging in? Well, you know, I mean, do you become a better driver just by driving? Well, I don't want you to learn how to drive by getting into accidents. I don't want you to learn air traffic control by having close calls, right? I want you to have a system in place that causes you to get better. So you can look into your performance and the performance of others as to how you get better, right? So we're gonna continue this in another series, but I'm going to give you the simple way, and you can push back on me. I've done this many, many times, right? And controllers, of all sorts of experience levels, will have varying opinions. But if you're getting at the essence of what something is, you have to understand what makes a controller better. So I'll ask simply, is a controller that can handle 10 airplanes better than a controller that can handle 8 airplanes? Right now, people will generally say, well, I got to know what the situation is, and what are you doing with the airplanes? And I said, no. Don't think that way, because now you're adding the extraneous things, the extraneous elements into what we're trying to do and get it to reverse engineer so we're at the essence of what it is. And clearly the controller that can handle 10 is better than the controller that can handle 8, okay? Just on a capacity level. So we know that capacity, a controller's capacity to handle a volume of airplane, is one of the ways that controllers need to know how to get better. Does that make sense? Right? So we'll get into some other things as we go along with this, but just stay with me, okay? Because we have placement practices, we have facility ratings, we have map numbers, right? Based upon a number of airplanes. So the number of airplanes matters to you and how you're going to get better. Because I want this 10 to become 11 or 12 or 13 or whatever it is, because if I'm not operating at capacity, generally speaking, I'm going to be able to do more with the airplanes, right? Which brings us to our second point. If you have one controller that can handle 10 airplanes and another controller that can handle 10 airplanes, this person subordinates. Now you're going to hear me use this word subordinate in a future video, and I'm going to explain what subordination and task subordination actually is in air traffic control and how it's important in your comfort. So if this controller subordinates to this amount of tasks and this controller subordinates to this amount of tasks, meaning he's doing more or she is doing more with the airplanes, I'm getting more things done with the airplanes, right? So which is the better controller? Well, it's the controller that's doing more with the airplanes. In other words, tasking matters. So we now know that tasking is a way that controllers need to understand how to get better. As a matter of fact, that's the essence of what air traffic controller is: recognizing, understanding, and being able to accomplish tasks, always starting with separation. We always separate the airplanes first. That's our first duty priority, along with safety alerts. So tasking, we can also say, is equal to your, or nearly equal to your awareness. As a matter of fact, that's one of those words that we got to come up with, because everybody says awareness like, oh, I got to know what awareness is. Well, I'm not aware, right? Well, every accident report I've ever read said the pilot was unaware, the controller was unaware. Well, if you're unaware of something, you're unconsciously incompetent. And that's not where you need to be as a controller. So I need you to understand what taskings need to be accomplished to get things done. Now you might say, well, gee, this person's just more efficient. Well, that brings us to our next thing. If you have one controller that can handle 10 and another controller that can handle 10, this person subordinates, they subordinate to the exact same amount of tasks. They're getting everything done. This person does it in 4 moves, this person does it in 8 moves. Just an example, which is the better controller? So we understand that economy, or efficiency, if you want to use that word, is a third way that we need to get better, right? Now, we need to also put priority in there. We have to establish a priority of tasking as well, don't we, right? So, but that could be secondary in here. These are the 3 ways that you can look into your performance and the performance of other controllers and find out, how can I get better? What happens to you as you get close to your number, like if it's 10, right? Some of these tasks probably go away. They call it, survival mode, right? So I got so busy, I couldn't do everything with the airplanes, and you rely on the system and your buddy that you're pitching to handle some of this stuff and to take care of it. So everything ends up getting done, but you can't do it all yourself. So if you're not operating at your capacity, you are able to task. And we want you to do these on the most safety critical first, right? We'll do a weather module, and I've done many weather accidents as an air safety investigator, and this is the most difficult thing for air traffic controllers to come to grips with is that, you know, we don't expect the airplane to crash because he's in weather, okay? That's not our expectation. We issue the weather, but you know, weather still is defined as an additional service, right? However, if the guy starts to get in trouble, then the duty priority, I guess, goes way up here, doesn't it, right? So what's our ability to recognize that situation? So we'll do a complete module, 20-minute module on this. So anyway, this is a starter for existential reasoning, reverse engineering, words, some things that we really need to put our brains around, wrap our brains around. Positive separation, awareness, what makes a controller better? This is where I'd like us to start. And that way, when I bring in other modules that are more technically oriented, we'll do scanning. Well, that's another word. Everybody says, oh, you're not. When's the last time your scan? You know, hey, tell your developmental, hey, you need to scan. And you know, their eyes are looking at the scope and they're putting, you know, like lasers through, and they can't find what you're but you can find it, right? So that's why understanding the task, you see the task, and that's what causes you to be aware, right? So you need to develop the way you look at your display to reveal task. When you reveal task, then all you need is the KSAs, the knowledge, skills, and ability to perform those things. So this is a real, and I don't want to make it overly simplistic because we can add a whole bunch of other things like vectoring and speed control and you know, altitude clearances and stuff like that. And so we'll get into that in a future video. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you got something out of this and some of the problems that we have as air traffic controllers, especially in training with these new people. We're at 22 minutes. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please send your comments to Peter Trono at atcconsulting.org, and we'll see you soon. All right. Thank you.